Um, Today's actually a holiday, but of course, I'm of the opinion that I get to do these things. I don't have to do these things, but I do expect that there's going to be a slightly smaller audience for us today. But nevertheless, I know some of the individuals that reached out and were really keen on joining the session and the discussion are hopefully going to stick around and we can catch some of that discussion as well because it's just so valuable. So. Without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And let's see, stop sharing. There we go. And yeah, Grant, I feel like if I did introduce you, I would do it wrong. So I'm asking you to reintroduce yourself. I'm sorry.
Hey, no worries, no worries. So new EIR for with Foresight. Um, my background is software, B2B enterprise sales and marketing with three different startups that were all in the East Coast in the Ottawa area. The last one I was with got bought by a US firm, at which point I shifted into business development and sales for managing the US federal market for that new parent company. So I was the oddball out, being the only Canadian to go and manage the large US federal market. I did that for 6.5, 7 years. So I'm going to relate my experience of doing that and sharing that with everybody. So feel free to ask questions. There's all sorts of different aspects to selling to the US federal government that I didn't have to experience firsthand, given the nature of the product and the market that we were going after. So it is a large market. And I'd love to understand who here is either selling or going to be selling to the U.S. federal market. Anybody got that? Okay, Jason, yeah, good to see you again, man. Hi, Ian.
Doing
All right. Do you want me to just share the screen now, Taylor?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. So the U.S. federal government is obviously huge. They spent 6.1 billion, it was either last year or the year before, on all sorts of services and products. And there is lots of links coming. As I said, I will send this deck out so that Taylor can share it so you don't have to worry about trying to copy all the links down because there's just too many of them to follow. Um, see, this moves forward now. Love you to think about, you got to do some research here because the market is so vast and it's quite deep. And also consider a local presence. And that'll give you some advantages under different purchasing preferences that the US federal government has, and then searching for different vehicles in which they make purchases through. Some of that could be the channels and consultants to talk about, and I've got a huge list of resources for you to go against and consider, researching. The Canadian government does a pretty good job of helping out, but there's also the federal government has set up at least three different areas that I've found that are very helpful. So take some time, understand what this market is. This is 2022, so I started off with I think it was a 2023 number on the purchases that the Fed's made. But you can go to this fiscal data at the treasury.gov and look at, more details of, they break it down to really good finite areas. So for Canadian companies, NAFTA has been replaced with the USMCA. So you can look at what's the preference for Canadians getting into the bids and winning awards. And then the two areas that Canada actually provides assistance is the trade commissioners. And they've got a really good site. I've copied and pasted a little image here at the bottom, sell the US government. And so the trade commissioners site and that other secondary page there, you can go and find out how they will support you. And they also delve into state and local, which I didn't deal with. I had colleagues and friends that dealt with state and local. And the Canadian Commercial Corporation is also very helpful. So take some time to see what free services can be provided by our government and where they're located. Obviously the Washington D.C. area, but they're going to be spread out throughout the U.S. To give you if I know we all know that they spent a ton of money, but to give you a sense of the size. The customers that I were dealing with were the Department of State, so every embassy and consulate, the U.S. Army, so 13 major commands, the Navy Marine Corps, the Air Force, National Institute of Health, and CDC. Those were all my customers. and they weren't customers when I started, so I landed quite large deals with all of them. And it wasn't until the CIO of the Army Medical Command, so one of the 13 major commands, placed an order for 100,000 licenses. And then a week later, he said, hold on, we found 10,000 more people. How can you miss 10,000 people? And he upped the license, increased it by 10%. And those were only the people that actually had laptops or computers. And so I thought, well, what's the size of our D&D? Our total size of our D&D was 65,000 people. And here's just the medical department of one of the commands for the Army that was twice the size of everything in Canada. So it is a massive industrial military complex, and it's just huge to what they spend. So I would suggest you go and register yourself at these two sites. The System for Award Management, you're going to see lots of bids placed up there, and the GSA schedule. So the General Services Agreement is a place where they negotiate, pre-negotiate a price at which the departments and agencies can purchase. They're trying to get the best price for the government. They didn't negotiate with us on volume pricing. They wanted, give me your baseline product and we'll take 10% off of that. That's what we eventually negotiated for. And you had to update it every time you had a new SKU, a new product updates, because they just wanted to be proven that they got the best price. So that didn't include volume pricing, as I said, and it didn't include services necessarily, or if you're doing R&D under contract for the government, but they did pre-approve you. So now that you're an approved bidder across almost all the agencies, the secret and black ops agencies do things a little bit different. I didn't have to deal with them too much. They kept on pulling me into discussions, and I kept on saying, I'm a Canadian. Let's go get an American counterpart because they would tell me stuff I shouldn't be knowing. They just, I don't know if they just thought, oh, Canadians are nice and easy and good people. But I had to constantly say, I don't want to know. And they did things a little bit differently. Lots of hidden budgets that they would go and source things through. You need to really get a DUNS and an NCAGE number, as you can see the NCAGE for the NATO commercial government entities. And then look at set-asides. They term them and classify them as A8. So it's just the way the government refers to them. Ultimately, check with your agency or department that you're selling to. But these are some of the things to look at getting onto the GSA first. And there may be some complications with that if you don't have a US address, but the Canadian consulates or trade commissions can be helpful there, and the GSA folks can be pretty helpful. So what are A8s? The groups to be considered as resellers. I think in Canada we call these offsets. So a big prime will come in, they'll win the business, $1 billion, or for instance, the Navy Marine Corps business I did, the EDS was the prime. It was a $9.8 billion program over 5 years, and they had a set aside of like 3% or 5% that they had to go and buy services or products from these types of companies listed here. So the government sets aside purposely for these, so you can go and find these companies out there. They should advertise themselves easily, and maybe the GSA even has a list in sight for those that you can partner with and consider them as somebody to resell your products or services through. So it's a way in which that in Canada the offsets can be in the millions of dollars because the prime has got it, but they want some of that business to stay into local Canadian companies, or in this case in the US, these small owned businesses. Here's a list of the most common contract vehicles. And I've got some links coming up for this. Uh, they're important ones to know and where they sit, and the agencies that you're selling to or the departments, go and ask them, what vehicles do you purchase off of? Is it IDIQ, indefinite delivery and indefinite quantity? So it's like an open-ended one that they just keep on renewing and saying, okay, we're going to do make purchases continue. Could be IT stuff, could be furniture, could be supplies. It's right across the board. The one that I was selling through was one out of San Diego called Spaywar, and I think that one's being renamed. Um, then the government-wide acquisitions on the right-hand side. So that's where A8 comes in as well. But you can see there's a ton of them out there. So you've got Solutions for Enterprise-Wide Procurement under NASA, the SEWP, SEWP. You've got multiple award contracts, the MAX. So there's multiple ones to learn out there. The other thing I'd recommend is looking for, and there's a three or four, and I think I've got a website listed, and that is U.S. government acronyms. So you'll want to be able to dive into those and ask, what are these? The OTAs are pretty good for the excuse me, R&D and prototyping. So if they find an interest in your technology and they want to apply it to a certain application and condition, then they will pay you for that. The most recent one I've seen is being able to do 3D printing in the field while you're on a moving vehicle. And that was quite a unique application. It's probably a 3 or 4 year program, and it was the U.S. Army in this case wanting to ensure that they could replace parts in the field while they're in motion, and of course not around anywhere where the supply chain is being impacted immensely. There is two areas where the government has assistance for smaller companies. And it almost looked like to me when I was reading through the Apex one, because that was a new one, that they've replaced the Ape Tech. So both sites are live, but it was interesting to see that one had claimed to be the most current over the other one. So this is when you have a US registered company that they'll support and assist. So Jason, I think you're in that situation where you've got a US and a Canadian company, so you could easily go through this and learn the ins and outs quickly, as well as the GSA and the SAM site. Get somebody who knows the tax and compliance. So you really need to understand what needs to be sent in as tax, what needs to be collected, and the FOCI as well. Because of course the US government's going to have limitations on what tech can be sold where, and they also want to understand who owns your company. Um, so the company I was with, we got bought by a US firm, so it was totally cool. We didn't have any issues with foreign ownership, control, or influence. By chance, we then bought two companies in Russia, which I couldn't believe the government, the US military was fine with having some of the software from a Russian source, and they had no qualms about it. It was very unusual, in my opinion. We used a consultant to get on the GSA. That cost us about 25 grand US, and they just managed it for it because we had multiple multiple SKUs. We had database management, we had access control management, we had reporting. So we had a large portfolio of products to be maintained. And so the outsourced consultants did all that management for us, as well as negotiating the price. And they can also, many of the consultants, if you're going to use them, look for folks that have been either in the military, in the agencies, they've graduated, sorry, not graduated, they've retired, and they're now doing consulting on the side because they've got lots of insights and contacts. We did use one of those for us to help navigate through parts of the DoD in the US, which was quite helpful. And they can also help you with go-to-market. I do have one consulting group, if you'd like to know, that I would recommend that I'm familiar with some of the folks there. You will need to typically have multiple bids. So the government say we pick the best bid. Doesn't necessarily mean the cheapest, but quite often it is the cheapest. So we set up a couple different resellers such that when it did come to the bidding, that there was people that could represent our product to the government and provide quotes. I did all the effort to ensure that our product was spec'd in. And then when it came out to the street, we were favored because of the way that it was spec'd in. So I didn't bid on anything out of the blue, which is an important thing to note. I was bidding on stuff where I'd influenced the decision-making process. They were familiar with us. And on this, also consider a US office. So my experience, very long sales cycles. I use that little icon on the right, the federal yellow book. It was a hard copy directory of all the agencies, the leaders in that. I was typically dealing with the CIOs and the directors of IT, and then some of the commanders in this case. They've the same company that produced that book, Leadership Connect IO, has gone on online. So if you want a complete list of who's who in the zoo there, that's the site to go to. I was focused, as I said, the CIOs and their staff, set the products as a go-to product first, and then partnered with influencers. In this case, our product was an add-on to Microsoft's technology. So I was partnering with Microsoft all the time. And then I would focus on some of the key systems integrators. And as I said before, some of the consultants that we had. Since we had a delivery component and software services, I would partner with the A8s and HP in particular to deliver those services. And we had one key reseller, but there is a lot of them out there, and you can use the A8s also as a reseller. So you have to play that multiple bidding game, which the government expects to take place, and be totally above board because they will have the right once you register into GSA to come and check your records. They can come and say, did you actually give us the lowest price compared to commercial offerings? And was there any funny stuff going on between you and the resellers? They never did it with us in the 7 years that we were selling to the that I was managing the sales team and doing direct sales for the team. But I must say it was uh, bit of a challenge because the deals were so big that you're either a hero or a zero. So you had all your eggs in one basket. Fortunately, we were very successful. We never had a 0 year. We were always almost 200% of our objectives each year, but they were long sales cycles. I'll give you one example. The Army took 3.5 years to close. Um, my direct experience, there's all sorts of events out there specific to the target customers that you can go and attend. I did that on a regular basis. And we also created specific events for them. Tons and tons of travel. I probably did 100,000 miles in the air each year, traveling internationally quite a bit. And the resellers were good, but they're also quite frustrating to work with. Um, and I was constantly trying to figure out how do we get sole sourced opportunities, and that only seemed to happen when you were the chosen one by an SI that was, they were bidding on the major programs. So you've got program revenue, you've got repeat revenue for commodities, and then you've got R&D revenue for the various agencies wanting to work with you to create something unique for them. And then there's a few just sort of interesting points here that I lived through. Two big U.S. government budget delays. That was very painful. This is where I was telling people not to tell me what they're doing. I had quite often folks would pull me aside. Hey, we're trying to do this in Afghanistan. I said, oh, I don't want to hear this. Okay, let me bring a U.S. counterpart in to listen to this. And then I was there. I landed the day that 9/11 happened. I was in the Pentagon the week before, so it was kind of good that I wasn't going to the Pentagon that day. And I don't know if you guys remember the sniper in Washington, but that was probably scarier than 9/11 in some senses. So that's it. Any questions?
Wow, Grant, thank you so much. This has been spectacular. I hope you're ready to pull those slides back up.
Oh yeah, yeah, you guys
Um,
can have them.
yeah, I think we'll do questions with Grant and everyone can, pepper him and then we'll do some just discussion after that. So yeah, if anyone wants to ask anything specific, now's your chance. Otherwise, I will ask. But okay, Jason, you're up.
Yes, thanks, Grant, for that overview. That was helpful. And yes, Zilla is, registered in the United States. We have a SAM number, a cage number. I think they did away with the DUNS number now. It's just the UEI
Okay.
number, is what my understanding is. We're certified at the state level and through a third party for minority business enterprise, and we're working on using the state certification to get into the A8. And I do have it was called a PTAC officer before, and now they have moved under Apex, so there's no more PTAC.
Okay.
The web
Okay.
may be up, but yeah, so it's all consolidated now. My question is specifically regarding the OTA because of where Zilla is at in its in the company development. We're just scaling up our first, ton of resin now and hoping to get into like a pilot demonstration with our floor coating resin. I'm curious about I've gone to several um, conferences and webinars and whatnot around local and federal procurement offices and their process. They always want you to have a capability statement. And it seems like they're anticipating that you are already a commercial viable entity, right? And so I'm curious about the space in between while we're scaling up with new technology for that R&D space. Can you talk more? What does OTA stand for? And you talked about you've never had to do an RFP. You made sure you were spec'd in. We are looking at what specifications or specific certifications like USDA BioPreferred program or what other certifications kind of get us in the door to get us for those R&D pilots with like military bases or whatever. Can you talk more
Right.
about that space?
Certainly, I'll do my best here. So OTA stands for Other Transaction Authorities. So that's really the R&D side of things. And I believe within each of the agencies, they've got that aspect to them. Like I couldn't point to specifically to where because it's probably modified slightly since I was doing it, and we didn't have to do a lot of R&D. Like we were off the shelf, buy it. Here's the product. Okay, you need quotes for services and for volume, right? And so uh, I think perhaps the Apex folks or the trade commissioners would be a good source to go and hunt that if it's not being very obvious. Because the government, they try to be very service oriented, but they're so big, they lots of things fall through the cracks. I wish I could say, here's the one site go to, but Jason, unfortunately, you do have to hunt and peck for that. So I don't have a really strong answer for you, but I can share that the OTAs, if you talk to them about that and you start using their acronyms or lingo, they're like, okay, yeah, I got it. Where do you think this is a fit? And what excuse me, what programs are looking to either use part of your technology, or is there a couple primes that are leading that would be a value for them to know about it? So I was always going either direct or through systems integrators.
Okay, thanks, Grant.
Okay.
James.
Grant, thanks. This has been fantastic. I got about a billion questions, but I don't think we have time. So I'm gonna start with a few.
Sorry, James, to
And
interrupt you. Sorry,
what's
I
that?
really apologize, James. I just want to put a disclaimer on the conversation that we are going to put this on YouTube. I will turn off the recording so we can have a closed discussion as well, but I just want everyone to be aware that this is going to be a public posted. Is that okay? I'm not saying you were going to ask something super, I just wanted to get it out there. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Grant, so I won't ask you which organizations. Actually, I'm going to ask you which organizations do would you suggest are first ones that companies should look at, and which ones are ones to maybe if this is a case where ones that you say stay away from based on your stages. And so that's kind of what I was thinking about is if you think about stage of operation and line that up against these U.S. entities, and then what? And the third part of this is what resources internally would you need at what stage to be effective in this? Because it seems highly complex to actually manage your way through. So, which ones are better? Which ones are worse? How do you line them on the stage? And resources that you actually need to be effective will be the three parts to that.
Certainly. So you got to think of each of these agencies having civilian side to it, and in the military, they're going to have the military side to it in this case. So the civilians will be there for long term. They know what they're doing. Typically, if they're slowly moving up the chain of command within the organization, and they're not necessarily political assignees either. So you're going to have, when the government changes, they're going to try and change the political leadership there as an award for, somebody being aligned with whoever the new administration is, the new president, etc. So then you need to look at the budgets. Okay, who's got what budget and what programs are still going forward? What have been left to be maintained and they're growing in size? Which ones have been either downsized or killed, right? So there's quite a few that once you understand that, then you start to know which ones to go for. So typically the military, and I only say that because it ended up that was the one that kept on, stating the interest. I wasn't going for the small agencies. I was going go big or go home in this case. And I focused on them and I focused on all the CIOs. However, there's lots of smaller, Bureau of Land Management, I can't even think of them off the top of my head, but there's tons. One home, HUD is in there as well, Housing and Urban Development. So there's a lot of smaller agencies that have huge, huge budgets compared to what Canadians have. So to manage the relationships there with them, find out what their purchasing vehicles are, what open contracts they have, do they have the budget, and then you can use that yellow book or the online equivalent to determine who is the ones to contact and introduce your product and solution to, and then find out how they go about educating themselves. They have seminars, events, etc. to do it. So depending on your product, like our product was pretty much off the shelf and you needed 10 to 20 days of services, and that was about it. So you need to figure out, okay, is our product a commodity somebody can just buy and use right away? They don't need any hand-holding and support, or are they actually going to need some services that this requires a longer sales cycle then? And are you, excuse me, selling direct or selling through an integrator? So as you said, James, there's lots of complexity here, but look for where's the money, what programs are being funded and continue to being funded, and then who are the people in charge? Because I hate to say this, but in the past administration, a lot of the big organizations, and this is out of Michael Lewis's book on the impact of the Trump administration coming in, and they didn't replace the top brass at the various big organizations. Like I think it was um, EPA, what's the FDA? They were all ready to hand over a book because they'd learned over the past 5 or 6 administrations to get this book ready to hand over to somebody, and nobody showed up. Nobody showed up from the Trump administration take over, and the ones that did show up, they were past buddies of Trump that didn't have any experience. So that meant, okay, who are the permanent people that aren't being replaced that are going to be there full time? And you could probably find that out just through that online yellow book. So from a startup sales point of view, if you can find a few key areas, which means a lot of hunting and pecking, first budget, then the people, and then the vehicles at which they're doing the purchasing through what programs, that's the targets to go after and be ready for long sales cycles. Is that
Thanks.
helpful? Was that helpful, James?
Yeah, no, definitely. It seems like you really can you your first time it'd be good to have somebody that can handhold you through the process because of the complexity of it.
Yeah. So back years ago, before Cognos got bought by IBM, the VP responsible for that, he just said, I'm hiring local talent. He said, I paid an arm and a leg for them, but they drove sales in the US federal government much, much quicker than hiring anybody new. So they hired experienced, top end sales people that had lived and breathed that space and knew all the contacts. And he said, we accelerated, like it would have taken us 3 or 4 years. We did it in a year and a half, 2 years. But they paid huge money for that. But they thought that was just worth it because the annuity for them for government business was magnificent. We didn't have that luxury. We started from zero, and the timing was just a combination of timing and focus happened to give us big deals very quickly, which was exceptional. It just happened to be, I think, a little bit of right place at the right time, but it was very, very focused. And I literally sat in Microsoft's office. They had this area where it was a lounge, and I would sit in there and work. And Microsoft people would walk by and go, "What are you doing here?" Eventually, they'd start to recognize me and bring me into customer discussions beyond what I was doing directly to for customers. And then they let me use their space to run events for free. So it was very strategic just to hang out in this case, the Microsoft office.
Grant, this is Ian. How valuable was the trade commissioner service when you were starting this stuff out? Did they give you any support, or were you guys on your own?
Um, I really didn't know about them. I just found the yellow book and ran with that. I
Okay,
just started dialing. I've heard good things about the Trade Commission service, so I would definitely go down that channel. Like I don't know, Ian, the impact, and of course they probably I'm sure they waiver and what effort and support they can give over each of our government administrations.
right. Okay, thanks.
So Grant, just if we were to say, you're a company that does electric car charging stations, how would you go about trying to sell that to the feds, or like, where would you go? You would look for everywhere that's got already existing kind of budget allocated towards electrifying government vehicles.
Well, in this case, I think Biden announced about 2 years ago an infrastructure goal to have X million of electric vehicle stations out there across the US. So I don't know where the money was flowing. Was that the feds flowing it down to state and local? Or was it the feds saying, "Hey, we're going to be responsible for buying these"? I can't believe they would be responsible unless it was on government property, right? So you're going to have public ones available. That would be, I think, that infrastructure bill flowing down to state and local, and the feds may, give some cash towards it, subsidize it, sorry. And then on their lands, then they may say, okay, well, we need to have this for these applications. Um, then, of course, you've got all around the world. The U.S. is just, I think there was 130 consulates and embassies that we had to deal with at the time when the Department of State was when we won that award. So there's got to be lots of land and locations internationally that the U.S. government's going to be looking at. How do we charge our vehicles? The other flip side to that is if they're buying vehicles from suppliers, and the suppliers have to, well, yeah, we need to make sure you can use these fully. So what's the life cycle of that? Maintenance, charging, etc. Then it's maybe through those vehicle providers to look at, yeah, this is for the government, and we're going to be adding on that charging station.
Interesting. So kind of Ford, who, supplies their existing fleet, has a leg up in that they've
Could
already,
be,
yeah, in that sense. Interesting.
yeah.
Any other questions that jump to mind for anybody, or anyone who wants to me to turn off the recording so we can just do some networking and chat a little more openly? All right, I'm gonna do that. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to today's Founder Friday. Really appreciate it, and Grant coming forward to use this time, on a holiday. Yeah, it's awesome, and so grateful and grateful that I was able to record this and share with the community so that they know that you're around and they can talk to you and ask me to connect with you as an EIR, as well as you've got your number and your slides in there. So please do send me your slides because I've already gotten several requests from people.
Yeah, I'll send that out.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off the recording now.